Hello YouTube, this is David Bowie, here to talk about our favorite subject, me. Now, where shall we start? I am, of course, David Bowie, and since 13 years old, I've always had an interest in music. It really started when I was 13, and my older brother, he introduced me to jazz, which started my interest in the saxophone, of course. I was also influenced by Elvis, Little Richard, and the jazz musicians my brother showed me, like Charles Mingus and John Coltrane. Also influenced by works like the Velvet Underground. And I pulled all of these artists together and my most cherished traits about them and incorporated them into my own music. Now, my older brother was committed to an institution, and that haunted me for many years. He was 9 years my senior, of course, and so it greatly motivated me to make more music. My career really took off in 1969 with my hit, A Space Oddity. Now, this was not the first time that I was interested in such things such as space. When I was a boy and I went to see 2001, A Space Odyssey, I was stoned out of my mind, and I saw it and I loved everything about it. And so I went on to star in The Man Who Fell from Earth. I had an acting career as well. And this was also further pushed by my interest in space, and so my persona Ziggy Stardust came about into being. Now, Ziggy Stardust went heavily with the 70s glam rock theme of the time, of glitter, androgyny, and really a lot of just excess, and things like fancy scarves. Everything was colorful and magnificent, and as was the time, 70s heavy metal was very big, and so, with Ziggy Stardust, and later on in my career as David Bowie, I focused on heavy metal a lot, and I really didn't have any political motivations for doing anything. There were some nationalistic ones. I believed at the time that Britain could have benefited from what I believed at the time was a fascist leader. We did not have one. I simply was a proponent of it back then in the day. Later on, I went to denounce fascism, but at the time, it was part of the reason that rock against racism became a thing, because of what I said, because of things that Eric Clapton said while drunk on stage, and later on, of course, I changed. But at the time, my influence in the music world in the 70s, in the 80s, was a lot of heavy metal and glam rock and things like that. And along with this, of course, I was a big influence in the fashion movement at the time. I played a big role in promoting even more of the 70s glam rock, things like outrageous outfits and just overall excess of the 70s. And if you look at my outfits throughout the time, it was a lot of colors, a lot of glitter, a lot of insane outfits, and it was all wonderful. It was superb. And this influence would go on to influence others. Later on, as my career was at its peak, I was helping out other artists like Iggy Pop also promote their own music and to go on to do their own works. And then I would also go on to influence other artists like Freddie Mercury. And this glam rock trend of the 70s, of the 80s, it just continued on. Later, I was influenced by, I don't know, how would I put it? My drug use decreased after I purchased a home in Switzerland. And so I went on to actually produce a lot of art as well. I did a lot of postmodernist work, and it actually sold. After my death, my family sold my works of art at Sotheby's, and it ended up totaling over $40 million. And after this, I even went into the bond business. My influence extended into the financial world as well, using my albums as an asset to back a series of bonds. It was called Bowie bonds. And Prudential eventually bought these out, which generated me around $50 million just from the sale of these bonds. After this, I was a huge believer in the internet. This was around the time that there was a big boom in it. And I actually had my own internet service provider called BowieNet. And BowieNet was an internet service provider like AT&T or anyone else. And it featured dial-up, it featured an email and internet access. It ended in 2006. But for a while, yes, I was David Bowie. The name was in every home. I was an ISP, an artist, an actor, and one of the most aggressive and how would I put a trope of 70s glam rock. That is where I really got my start. And so, yes, my influence in the world of rock and roll is epitomized in the 70s and the 80s as glamorous and as a time of excess, of beauty, and of glitter. And that is my legacy unto this day. So yeah, Major Tom, A Space Oddity, and all those works in between. And so yes, this has been David Bowie for History of Rock.